Ali Al-Qari discusses the issue of predestination in further detail in his commentary on Al-Fiqh Al-Akbar by Abu Hanifa. He writes in the chapter he has set for predestination, Al-Qawlu fil Qadr, God exalted is He, created things, not from anything, and God was knowing in pre-eternity with things as they would be before its existence, and He preordained things and decreed it, and there is not in the world and neither in the hereafter a thing except with His will and His knowledge and His decree and His preordinance, and He wrote it in the preserved tablet. However, He wrote it with description and not with order, i.e. He wrote it because He knew in His pre-eternal knowledge that things were to be so and so, and not to compel things to be so and so, as has been previously related in previous videos by Ali Al-Qari. And decree and preordinance and will are His attributes in pre-eternity without a how. He writes further, وَلَمْ يُجْبِرَ أَحَدًا مِنْ خَلْقِهِ عَلَى الْكُفْرِ وَعَلَى الْإِيمَانِ. He did not compel anyone from His creation upon disbelief nor upon belief. This once again reflects the Maturidi view that God preordaining things does not compel the servants to do certain actions. Rather, it is simply according to God's pre-eternal knowledge that certain servants would do so and so actions, that He preordained them. Then in page 86, he mentions, وَلَا خَلَقَهُمْ مُؤْمِنًا وَلَا كَافِرًا. He did not create them believers nor disbelievers. وَلَكِنَّ خَلَقَهُمْ أَشْخَاصًا. But rather He created them as individuals. وَالْإِيمَانُ وَالْكُفْرُ فِعْلُ الْعِبَادِ. And belief and disbelief are the actions of the servants. He then further writes, وَجَمِيعُ أَفْعَالِ الْعِبَادِ مِنَ الْحَرَكَةِ وَالسُّكُونِ كَسْبُهُمْ عَلَى الْحَقِيقَةِ. And all of the actions of the servants from motion and stationary, being stationary, are their acquisitions in reality. وَاللَّهُ تَعَالَى خَالِقُهَا. And God Almighty is its creator. He then goes on to mention obedience to God, and that الطاعات محبوبة لله والمعاصي مقدورة غير محبوبة. That obediences or acts of obedience are beloved to God, and sins are preordained, not beloved, meaning other than the fact that they are beloved, meaning God has preordained sins for His servants, but it does not necessitate that they are beloved actions to God. Ali Al-Qari writes, and acts of obedience, all of it, which are obligatory by the order of God, and by His love, and His pleasure, and His knowledge, and His will, and His decree, and His preordaining. So essentially, good deeds, or acts of obedience to God, are considered by His love and pleasure, and His preordaining. And sins, all of them, with His knowledge, and His decree, and His preordaining, and His will, not by His love, and not by His pleasure, and not by His order. This reflects the Maturidi view that sins are preordained not out of God's love and pleasure, but rather out of His attribute of divine will, that He does as He wills in His creation. And acts of obedience, on the other hand, are simultaneously pleasing to God and beloved to God, and are also preordained by God. This is what I would term the pleasure and preordinance distinction, meaning the preordinance of God, God decreeing, in that the fact that God preordains certain actions and certain things does not actually necessitate that He is pleased by those actions. His pleasure is one thing and His decree is another thing. His decree does not necessitate His pleasure, and His pleasure does not necessitate His decree. So for example, if God has decreed according to His pre-eternal knowledge that so-and-so servant would do so-and-so sin, it does not mean that He is pleased with that sin. Rather, he has simply decreed that sin, but he is not pleased with that, and he has not ordered on a divine legalistic basis for that sin to be committed, in the sense that it should be done, but rather he preordained it because of his pre-eternal knowledge that it was to be done by his servant. This again comes back to the basic Maturidi point that God preordained everything according to his knowledge. His preordaining doesn't compel servants to do certain actions, rather it's simply his pre-eternal knowledge that they were going to do so and so actions. Hence, his preordaining certain actions then wouldn't compel individuals to do those actions. It's still out of their free will. And hence, God orders them on a legalistic basis, on a divine legalistic basis through revelation, not to commit certain sins. Yet they do commit certain sins according to his will. And so, his will is in distinction to his order and his pleasure, essentially. This perhaps solves the problem of whether or not, and as to why God would preordain certain people to do certain actions that go against his divine law. See, God has given humans free will, and he has set out criteria for good and bad. And if his preordaining hasn't compelled anyone to certain actions, that means that God has ordered people to certain things. They've disobeyed his divine decree, in the sense that they have disobeyed the legal norms that he has set down, and hence those actions of theirs would not be beloved to God, it would not be pleasing to God, and it's not something God would have ordered to, but rather it's something God would have willed, without his pleasure or his love or his ordering being necessitated. Of course, perhaps the Mu'tazila would disagree with this viewpoint, and they would say God must do what's in the best interest of his servant. But the Maturidi view provides perhaps a solution to the soft determinism of the Ash'aris, and especially of Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, and yet at the same time provides an answer to the Mu'tazila's views and concerns regarding God doing what's in the best interest of his servant, as God's fate, once again, God preordaining certain things, and divine fate does not compel people to do certain actions. It's simply his pre-eternal knowledge that they will do certain actions, and that doesn't necessitate his pleasure and love and ordering to it, but rather simply that he willed for those things to occur, and that does not necessitate his pleasure or his being pleased with those actions. Ali Al-Qari then mentions the prophetic narration that the first of what God created is the pen. Then he said to it, meaning the pen, write. Then the pen said, what should I write, O Lord? Then God exalted as he said, write about what will be till the day of judgment. And in this, Ali Al-Qari writes, is a proof upon what the people of truth have said, that the realities of things are established. This is as, first of all, Ali Al-Qari mentions this narration as part of the Islamic sort of creation story and the Islamic narrative regarding the creation of things. And this is, in a sense, part of the metaphysical paradigm of the Islamic tradition, in the sense that God has already written down everything that was to occur. And furthermore, this confirms the statements that the realities of things are established, aka in the divine pen and the divine tablet. Of course, there's a discussion about, on a more philosophical and metaphysical basis, about the essences of things, and do they exist in reality, and are they independent extra-mental existences, or are they mental existences? But what this narration may suggest, or what the Islamic metaphysical paradigm of this kind may help to solve, is the fact that these realities really are established. They are real. They aren't simply figments of the imagination, or things that can be doubted in their reality and being established. Because God has already written down that all those things that should exist, and the realities of all those things, in the divine pen and the divine tablet. So if you're a Muslim, this as a Muslim theologian, this may solve those issues. But even if you're not a Muslim, what can still be derived as a benefit from this, perhaps, is that God's pre-eternal knowledge consists of the knowledge of all existent things that were to be until the day of judgment. And hence all things in reality are known in God's pre-eternal knowledge, and hence their realities are established essentially in a way.